Welcome everyone, Questini here with a discussion about the ogres in patch 5.3, where Creative Assembly has effectively given us a preview of the ogre rework in some way, or at the very least given us an idea of how they want the ogres to play with the rework based on what they've done with the bounties in particular. Because there's only two changes that they've made to the ogres. One is the idea that you can get a more varied group of mercenaries from the camps. If you have an ogre faction near you and they have a camp near you, you can get more mercenaries, including man-eaters, cavalry, all that, giants. Well, that particular change didn't quite work out, because everything else, the research tree, the camp system, all that, is still there. And the problem is, a lot of the ogre factions lose their camps very, very easily. Even like the Thunder Tusks, who, if I'm not mistaken, they start with the camp right here. I could get mercenaries for Emmerich. I tried playing Emmerich's campaign to try and get mercenaries. I could get mercenaries for the first few turns, and then it just went away. I don't think it was diplomacy. I think the AI just got rid of its camp, in its initial camp. And then with Greases, I tried playing as Yao Ming. Alain Greases, well, the dumbass kept putting camps over here in Grimgore's path, and as you might imagine, they got wiped out. So that system, even when you're playing like, say, Greases and you're allying fellow ogres, you'll find yourself in a situation where trying to get units from those camps is not quite gonna work out. So on the aspect of the ogre mercenary system, without changes to camps, it's not working out. Like, camps they still can't be moved. They still don't offer good defenses. They're very easy to wipe out. And yet they're the center of your recruitment, and in some ways your economy. So that I don't think works out, at least in isolation. And you do need camp changes, economy changes, I think, too, for the ogres. And the minor ogre factions get wiped out very, very easily. But there is a more substantial change with regards to the bounty system. So you get up to 3 bounties in an ogre campaign. So over here, I just reloaded to save. I only have 2 over here. Actually, I was supposed to have 3. I'm not sure why I only have 2. But you can have up to 3 bounties. Now, these will give you differing rewards. All of them will give you diplomatic relations with the faction you're working with, some money, and an item or meat for a particular lord, or more importantly, camp growth. Now, this is great in some ways and not so great in others. The reason it's great is because, one, it gives you a diverse group of objectives, a dynamic set of objectives that will always be randomized at the beginning of your campaign. However, there are tons of issues with this. While that's nice, and believe it or not, while the money may not seem significant, but when you're actually playing a campaign as the ogres and you're doing one objective after another and it flows naturally, you get a lot of money for this. The problem is the diplomatic relations benefits are not significant enough. I'll give you an idea with regards to that. Say, for instance, I have, let me just use this as an example. We got Emmerich over here. My relationship is going with minus 165 over there. So let's say I sell him, Bitter Bay, right? He even pays me for that. That already, so it was going to 165, and that was a low-level settlement. A higher-level settlement would work more. So the problem is the diplomatic relations benefit is kind of fluff. I think we need better benefits in terms of diplomacy, like a trespass penalty, or maybe some objectives that would give you a defensive alliance. Non-aggression pacts would be great, at least with certain factions on that level. But the problem is, when you're building up relations with, the idea, I'm sure, for CA is oh, you do contracts for various factions, all that. But the problem is, with respect to it, is you start doing contracts with one faction, you're going to piss off the faction that hate them. It doesn't matter if you're at war with them or not, you're going to piss off. So, for instance, let's say I do a contract for the Bloody Hands, and dwarves are going to be pissed off with me, even if I haven't interacted with the dwarves at all diplomatically. Because I'm gaining relations, that's obviously going to hurt me in other ways. So that is not great. The Bigger problem, though, is how freaking annoying this can be. So, in the campaigns I've tried as Greases, I've tried playing both Scrag and Greases. This is the longest campaign I've played, 68 turns. Almost completing. And by the way, I am far from completing campaign victory conditions, not because I haven't reached a quota of settlements, but because I need to take a wide array of settlements all over the freaking place. But regardless of that point, which, yes, it is annoying, like range far and wide as the ogres. Believe me, you still run out of meat, though. I don't know, like meat seemed less of an issue. There were some times when I ran out with it, but for most part, I haven't had many problems with that. But you do get a lot of camp growth. Here's the thing, though. These objectives are randomized from very early on. You don't get the set of objectives on turn 1. You get them on turn 3. But if you don't get the camp growth objective, that is easy to do, because that's the other thing. These objectives are insane in some ways. Like, you can get an objective, like, let's say in this campaign, I literally got an objective to sack Nobley Gorge from the Skaven over here. Pretty easy, pretty sensical, and I got it on turn 3. So I did it, because I was in Shambletown. So, for instance, I took the Great Hall of Greases, then a Grimtop. No, I started with Great Hall of Greases, took Grimtop, turn 2, took Shambletown. And so I was really easily able to do that. When you have that dynamic, it's great, it's fantastic. But then when you get some of these objectives like, oh, the Bloody Hands want me to go for Zufbar, who's controlled by Belagar, who I'd rather not piss off. The issue, though, isn't that some of these objectives are insane. So, the objectives are given to you by factions you share a border with. Okay, all fine, all sensical. But the problem is that the objectives aren't even with on territories that they border, even if it's on the other side of their empire. Like, you can genuinely get an objective from Xiaoming, which is like, oh yeah, you start here, imagine that. You might get an objective early on, which is like, oh yeah, go over here and take Shillong, for instance. It's not worth doing. Like, even if it gave me 10 times the money, it would still not be worth freaking doing. I can get more money if I conquer territories along the way. I can get more money if I conquer fucking Xiao Ming than doing his objective, if that's the case. So that's a problem. Now, I'm not saying that, like, I think, like, some things like upkeep benefits, technologies, you know, certain diplomatic relations, and immunity from getting, you know, like, ogres should be available for everyone, but it feels like less like playing a mercenary and more like playing the mafia. But the problem is, you're not the one that's getting paid protection money. Oh yeah, you get some of it. In fact, but in point of fact, it feels like you're the one paying all these factions protection money so they don't declare war on you. Because on one hand, these objectives that you have and the ogre playstyle as it is, yes, you can get camps mercifully. You can get high-level camps very early on, though you're going to run into the issue of money. But the intent, I'm sure, for creative assembly is like, okay, ogres can range far and wide. They don't need to worry too much about territory. Beyond the fact that camps can move. It's like you're leaving those camps and your territories that you do acquire, that you care about, because you do want trade resources in particular. That's the one thing that's actually useful for ogres, because that's how you can earn some money. Like, I'm earning 6,200 from trade. And mind you, yeah, things like, you know, gemstones and all that. But here's the problem. And I probably may want to get rid of one of these buildings. I'll think about it. But here's the issue. When I say that it feels like you're the one paying these factions protection money, well, if you try and go the neutral path, everyone's going to declare war on you. So you need to get allies, which means certain factions are precluded. But even with allies, they're not going to be the most reliable ones. And not necessarily because of how they feel towards each other. Like, Cafe and Greenskins don't really hate each other as much. So the idea that I'm allied with Miao Ying, Grimgor, and Xiaoming, that's actually not the problem. The problem is you have so many factions declaring war on you that eventually your allies, or very quickly your allies, are going to be like, I'm out. So and they'll even do this naturally. They'll break their alliances with you. But you need to maintain those alliances, because with ogre camps, if you leave an ogre camp in neutral territory, in territory that's not allied, it will do raiding, which will hurt your diplomatic possibilities. So what you end up doing in an ogre campaign is something something like playing protection money to these guys. I can imagine Greasus standing at the head of a table with his copper regimes, his captains, and it's like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We gave Miao Yang Wei Jin, but she's still pretty weak, so she might end up breaking our alliance. We gotta worry about the rat. Not quite able to declare war on him, because we did before, and yeah, they'll all be pissed off for whatever reason if we declare war too quickly again, so we gotta wait. Then we got Xiaoming. He's pretty happy right now. It should be, the bastard. We gave him the entire fortress of Urak, so yeah, don't worry too much about him. Skarsnik? Do we care? Not really. So, whatever. But we don't want to piss him off. Then we got dwarves coming in. We got Warzeg. We gotta worry about these guys. And we gotta worry about keeping Gregor happy. Keep Grimgor happy. I don't care about anything else. Seriously, that's how it feels to play a Greasus campaign. It's like you're stressing over the herding of the cats in every single way possible in order to keep these factions happy, because the way you build your empire is intrinsically tied on the relationships you have with these factions. And Archaon is coming in from the north, by the way, over here, so I'm gonna have a few problems over there with respect to that. But yeah, I've had every single ally, and even several factions that are no longer my allies, break those alliances multiple times over in this campaign. So what I'm trying to say is, the system is great when it works, when you have fluidity and dynamic objectives. It starts falling apart, however, if the objectives don't work well enough. One of the things I've mentioned in a campaign is with the Tomb Kings in Volkmar and Manfred is how horrible the Books of Nagash are, because you want certain benefits from those Books of Nagash in terms of like buffs. But the problem is the books, the effects of those books are randomized. Well, the thing is with ogres, it's worse, much worse, because every time you get an objective, it's randomized. The first set of objectives on turn 3 is randomized. And if you're not getting some good camp growth early on, you're just basically playing the worst fucking race in the game, because the ogres are still the worst race. When it works well, it's much better. Now, of course, we're gonna get a bunch of other changes for the ogres, but I think like the system needs some further tweaking, and ogres need some kind of diplomacy capability to make their neutral mercenary playstyle work. I don't know. That would be my perspective. I think, however, it would be nice if we had an objective, or we had more types of objectives that we could pick from. In the sense that we should always get the camp growth objective. We should always get an objective that gives us an item, and we should get an objective like maybe, a couple objectives, like 1 or 2 that always give you growth. Maybe we have more than 3 objectives. And the ability of just like, okay, I'm not interested in this bounty. Next. That's something the ogres should say. But you can't cancel these bounties in any way, shape, or form. And they can last a very long time. So, like, you end up in a situation where this tab fills out, and you got nothing to do but wait, or hope the objective is aborted, because you going after something like Yetkich or Zufbar is absurd. So, some geographic constraints, ability of canceling contra, bounty, all that, would be good. That is where I stand on that subject. Finally, let's talk a bit about the new items that Creative Assembly has added. Well, you get them randomly for battles. Like, there's the Helm of Dreska. I'm not sure I would want to equip this one. Because it's like, you have a 1% chance for this character to die upon ending the turn. Oh man, you got Unbreakable, Expert Charge Defense, but it's not really that great of an item, to be quite honest with you. So it's like, Now, there's of course some other items that are available as well for that, but it's like, yeah, that kind of like, well, you want the 1% chance of dying at every single turn or getting wounded by getting wounded for 14 turns. Ouch. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.